All right, good evening. We will call the March 25th, 2024 City Council meeting to order. If the clerk can call the roll.
Councilmember Lithcott-Haynes.
Here.
Councilmember Tanaka. Vice Mayor Lowing.
Here.
Councilmember Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Vinker.
Here.
Councilmember Koo. Mayor Stone.
Here.
For the record, 5 present.
Thank you. We'll move to our first item of business, which is a closed session conference with city attorney regarding existing litigation, Reinert versus the city of Palo Alto. And we'll move to public comment on the closed session.
Our first speaker is Liz G.
Hi, yeah, Liz Gardner, thank you. I just thought I would just mention are you guys counting me down? Okay, there. Liz Gardner, yes. I just would really hope that in the future you guys are really doing a lot of closed session meetings these days. If we could have a lot more public transparency and discussion around these items. That's all I'm going to say for this item tonight. Thank you.
That concludes public comment on closed session item 1.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Clerk can call the vote.
Councilmember Burt. Yes. Mayor Stone.
Yes.
Councilmember Koo.
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott-Haynes.
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lowing. Yes. Councilmember Vinker.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Closed session is estimated to be complete by 5:45. Again, that is an estimate. Thank you. All right, we're back from closed session. No reportable action. Move on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. City Manager,
No changes this evening, Mayor.
thank you. Now, council member questions, comments, and announcements. Councilmember Vinker.
Thank you, Mayor Stone. I just wanted to congratulate Julia Zeitlin and her high school colleagues on yesterday's launch of the Green Team Coalition, which is a network of environmental clubs from schools across California. So a green team is a school environmental club whose goal is to raise awareness about environmental issues in their school community and to take action to reduce their school's environmental impact by addressing school-wide transportation, waste disposal, food options, buildings and facilities, and more. And so this coalition connects green team leaders to share ideas and best practices. So also to them, a big thank you for inviting me to speak and for the insightful Q&A that followed. The member schools include Castanea, Palo Alto High School, Gunn High School, the Nueva School, College Prep, International High School, Lick Wilmerding, Mountain View High School, the Thatcher School down in LA, and Mabeck High School. And so leaders from our schools include Julia and Kelsey from Casti, Phoebe from Gunn, and Avro from Pali. So congratulations and thank you to our amazing climate-aware high school students.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other lights, we'll move on to our action items. Item 2, approval of the 2024 City Council priority objectives and Finance Committee and Policy and Services Committee work plans. Reminder, this item has been continued from March 4th, March 11th, and March 18th. We took public comment and closed the public testimony at the March 4th meeting, so there will be no additional public testimony during this item. And I believe we are now on to community health, wellness, belonging, and safety. Got the order wrong, but I got them all there. So is there anything from staff? All right, wonderful. Then bring it back to the dais for questions, comments, and motions. Councilmember Koo.
Thank you. I wanted to bring up Fire Station 2 and 4. My understanding is there's no water there. So I think that perhaps that's something that should be referred. Well, actually, I think that would be, I'm sorry, I think that's a later item for referrals. Sorry about that. So then I'm not going to talk about Fire Station 2 and 4 for now. I'm going to talk about it later when we go into referrals
Oh, you mean like a referral to Policy and Services?
to Finance Committee.
Or the Finance Committee?
Yeah.
Then that, yeah, then
Okay,
that would be
thank you.
later.
The other one is for community safety. I would really like for the Transportation Department to start looking at safe routes from Stanford University residences crossing across Page Mill into going towards Fletcher, as well as Gunn High School. And to start working with Stanford Research Park in terms of making sure we have safe routes. So if that could be something that's added into community safety into this programming. Or would it already fall under some sort of transportation under this safety infrastructure and systems?
Happy to respond, and we'll see if Mr. Kami wants to elaborate. Just as an initial response, I believe actually both are, or that would be covered under two ongoing efforts. One is our citywide bicycle pedestrian transportation plan, and second, our safe systems project as well. So Mr. Kami, you confirm, and if so, whether that is listed or should be listed among the council priorities, and perhaps give a perspective on that.
Thank you very much, City Manager Shikata. Philip Cami, Chief Transportation Official here. Yeah, I would say those are both items that would fall within both of those plans, but also the existing work of the Safe Routes to Schools team. So that is under their existing, work plan. That is work that they actually already are undertaking, regardless of it being a priority. But yeah, the Safe Streets for All action plan will look at safety for all road users, and the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan looks specifically at our bicycle and pedestrian network.
Thank you, Mr. Kami. I just want to make sure that this particular route that is going across Page Mill on Peter Coots is one that is going to be included into this analysis or study. But I'm glad that, thank you for your response to it. That's all, Mayor Stone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, just a continuation from last time. I was told when I asked about, I think it was called Living Wisdom, is the guys that came here to talk about renting out Cubberley. And I guess I'd like to get some clarification from staff. So is there actually space to be rented out at Cubberley? Or I guess what are the reasons why that was denied for that school?
Sure. Let me take the first response on that and then ask either Director O'Kane, or actually this may be a new opportunity for our Director Lai as it relates to our leasing policies. There are a couple of classrooms next to the existing space that's being rented by Living Wisdom High School. And so staff is currently looking at the appropriate both term as well as terms that would be applicable here. As I recall, we have on the order of 75 groups that have requested space at Cubberley. So there is a question of how that space should be allocated, especially given a variety of both rent amount as well as terms and what's appropriate for different buildings given the ongoing negotiations between PAUSD and the city. So this is a pending follow-up to that inquiry, and perhaps I can ask the directors if they've got any specific timeline in mind, but if not, that's information we'll need to provide back to the council. Okay, well, I think that will have to stand as our staff response.
Okay, so I guess my feeling on this is that, is there going to be a staff response? No? Guess not. Okay.
I don't think we have any additional information on that here this evening.
Okay. My feeling is, well, I guess first of all, I think, and maybe some of the people who spoke last time didn't know, but they said that there's vacancies there. That's what they said. And many of them said that. So don't know if that's true or not, or maybe it just happens to be vacancies at certain times. But if there are vacancies, which sounds like you're saying they're not, then I can't see why we wouldn't consider it. And in terms of
Councilman, just to clarify, I said that there are two
there are
classrooms
vacancies. Oh, okay.
that are vacant
There are
adjacent.
classrooms. Okay. So if there are classrooms that are vacant, and they're willing to be flexible on the term because we might redevelop it, I can't see why not renting it out to them, to me. And of course, my colleagues could say otherwise. And then in terms of rent amount, I think it should be market rent, right? And we should try to make some money on our properties. So anyways, that's my feeling. Don't know my colleagues' thoughts, but we had a lot of people that came out to speak.
Councilmember Burke.
Thank you. Thank you. So first, I wanted to touch on item 76, which is developing a work plan on community special events. And at the last Finance Committee, we actually had some discussion around, in the context of our HISRIP funding, about certain programs that the community values, the council values, but they don't necessarily fit within the parameters of the HISRIP funding. And we began to discuss the possibility of a recognizing a fund that would break off the funding for certain special events. And so first I wanted to share that with the council because it ties in with how do we proceed on fulfilling number 76. And, we have different things that have emerged. We've had certain programs that are a combination of economic development value and community wellness and value, like the Third Thursday, like the UNAF Festival, and they hit different buckets. So I don't think it requires any action by us at this time, but I want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. And if they wanted to wade in on that, they had an opportunity to do so. And then the more substantive one that I've been thinking a lot about is we all are concerned with trying to do everything possible to make sure our tracks are as safe and secure as possible. And you may all know that we received over a year ago notification of a federal earmark of an additional $500,000 for fencing along the Caltrain corridor. City Manager, if I got that right, we have the full west side fence citywide, if I recall. Excuse me, east side. East side. And this would maybe be about a third of the west side or something like that, in that our staff and Caltrain has already gone out and identified priority locations, and so that we're teed up and ready as soon as we finally receive the federal dollars, we can proceed. That's all lead up to what I've been thinking about, is that I think we really ought to set as a capital improvement priority completion of the fencing on the west side and any other safety and security upgrades to the advanced technologies on detection, intrusion detection that we already have. What are next advancements and additional technology that we can do to make our tracks safer and more secure, with a recognition that no set of programs will be perfect and impermeable, but every improvement we do provides real benefit. I'm also assuming that this would not be accomplished all in this calendar year. And so it perhaps would be a couple of a year program in combination with Caltrain to do that. And I will add that Caltrain is now moving in a direction of would be a multi-year period, a more quarter-wide best practices of safety and security throughout the corridor. So, City Manager, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's something that I'd like to hear my colleagues' opinions as well on whether we should add this to our capital program and have staff come back over, initially the planning stage and then the implementation stage of that, the time frame. And we wouldn't necessarily we might have some ballpark on fencing costs, but other costs we wouldn't necessarily know yet.
Right. I believe at this point, we won't have cost estimates for the fencing, although we know that Caltrain is working on that. Just perhaps for clarification, and for those who haven't been tracking the issue closely, Caltrain is expected, and in fact, it sounds like they just received approval on the earmark that would provide $500,000 for fencing improvements in Palo Alto. And they've informed us that they believe that will allow for the replacement of existing wrought iron fencing along the west side of the tracks from University area through Churchill. And again, they're still early in the planning of that, but that's the basic scope that they hope to be able to achieve. The remainder of the west side of the tracks in Palo Alto is essentially adjacent to residential fencing. So as Councilmember Burt pointed out, if the city were to undertake that as a project, it would be extending that the installation of the wire mesh fencing adjacent to residential fences through the remainder of Palo Alto from Churchill on south. Again, Caltrain, we believe, is currently working on the designs and cost estimates. And so that should give us a reasonable ballpark of what the extending their fencing project would involve. That's essentially the focus at this point in the work we've been doing with Caltrain. We do actually expect to have a meeting within the next week, actually may even be this week, to talk about their status. The other ongoing work that really just came up at the city schools meeting last week was the suggestion of city schools liaison committee becoming more actively involved in the broader topic of youth mental health and what might be done in cooperation between the two agencies. At this point, we are just about 30 days away from delivering to you your capital budget for next year. So I think that we will be able to give you a sense of where the current planning for projects is, and that may be the best venue for a discussion of what flexibility we have and what could be done going forward. I would note, I think just important to acknowledge the question of what would be city projects versus what would be Caltrain projects are still open questions.
Vice Mayor Lowing.
First of all, I would strongly support what Councilmember Burt just outlined. And I'd like to see it in the objectives, not just the capital plan, because the community is still mourning, as we all are, and looking for some things to do. This seems concrete, not inexpensive, of course. And in the context of having an objective to, move the ball forward on making us safe, I think it'd be great to have that included here.
I would just note that on that topic of, again, community participation and what the city is doing, just put a plug in for our ongoing mental health first aid training programs that are available to the community. I believe I reported last week, or if I didn't, let me share that the first two sessions that had been scheduled for a 30-person each were fully subscribed. And so we're now working on an additional 2 sessions that can be offered to community members. And I believe this was set up through our community service department. And we also have sessions that our library department is hosting. So that particular area has obviously been a program of great interest, and certainly want to support continued expansion.
Would that be encompassed in item 81, increased support and funding for youth mental health?
It could be, certainly. I don't know if that was what we had in mind when we first took this on, but I believe that at the broadest sense, that would allow both for the capital and ongoing programming support provided by the city. And perhaps something of a placeholder for the mayor's task force work that is also ongoing. I know we expect to hear more on that as that work proceeds. But again, 81 would be a placeholder for that.
Can I dialogue once again? So are you not quite comfortable having a specific objective around either the fencing or generally taking actions to support that safety? I mean, I know you are personally. I'm asking about the
Sure.
Objectives here.
Well, I think that what we've got there on the line item provides a sufficient overall objective and a time frame in which I think we can advance all of the interests that have been expressed.
Okay. Thanks for those comments. I had a question on 93 about initiating work on a quiet zone and we're ticking off all 3 rail crossings that are not already underway. Is that? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, Chief Transportation Official Philip Cami here again. The next part of this process, so I'm getting a whole bunch of pop-ups right now, is for the Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston crossings. We'd already initiated the Palo Alto quiet zone, which was in last year's council priorities.
Right. And I was saying we're committing in objectives to the first 3 in addition to the one that's already addressed to take action on that this year. And then is there?
Sorry,
I was going to say, is there a way that you can define initial analysis?
Yeah, there's a study that needs to be completed in order for us to figure out what the project, to define the project, what is needed for us to accomplish a quiet zone in order for us to feel that we reasonably can get it approved by the CPUC and Caltrain. So that's really what the initial analysis would be. It'd be that analysis, it'd be the community outreach on what the project would entail. There's a pretty smooth process for Palo Alto Avenue, but a little bit more complex for the other locations that are expected to be more complex projects.
Good. I was just going to add that last sentence. They're not as easy as Alma, so I think that needs to be pointed out to the public. On 84, I brought this up, I think in the first meeting, just in general about how we're sort of wording things. This is the one where it says support visible police presence by ensuring stable staffing through hiring ahead program. And as I've read it a few more times, it seems like the objective is to implement a new hiring ahead program to achieve those objectives. Is that correct? Because it just feels a little fuzzy to me, because the first time I commented on this, I said it seems like, of course, it's ongoing best practices, but you might have a bigger program that you're trying to implement.
Well, and what I can say is some of the history behind this is, hopefully Chief can come up to elaborate, is that I want to say not this past mid-year, but one mid-year ago, the council provided specific direction actually to authorize hire ahead of 5 officers beyond our current kind of hire ahead authorization levels. And so this is speaking towards that more aggressive hire ahead program as we work to fill our vacancies. But I will have Chief talk, because I think we are trying to fill our vacancies before we can move to a more proactive hire ahead program.
Great.
Good evening, Council. Andrew Binder, Police Chief. I think Ms. Nozay set some good context. You know, what we found in 2020 with the COVID financial crisis is that we had a hiring freeze throughout the city. Couple that with what it takes, I'll call it the ramp up or drive pipeline to get an officer up and going. If you were to tell me today I could hire 5 officers, it'd be anywhere from 15 to 18 months before they were actually on the street contributing to our on-duty personnel. And so I believe it was Mayor Burt back then identified the need to have a constant pipeline of hiring, so that when the police department identified people that were going to be retiring, leaving the department, leaving for various other reasons, that the police department was in the position to start hiring new officers so that we decreased that lag time. Because essentially what happens is we're always playing catch up if we're not staying ahead of the game. And so essentially this priority just gives us that flexibility, that opportunity to keep officers coming in to get to that 12 to 15 month mark. So that way we're really closing that gap from when someone's leaving and we're bringing on that new officer.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Councilmember Vink.
Thank you, Mayor Stone. So I wanted to lift up 2 objectives that I think we all support, but and we know are related, but wanted to add some information. So item 77 is reach a tentative agreement with PAUSD on the long-term use of Coverly. And obviously there's a lot of activity. We have an ad hoc working on it. And 78 is evaluate the Recreation Wellness Center feasibility. So I just wanted to report as the PRC liaison that PRC is, looking from time to time at the Wellness Center and considering sites, including Cubberley. And I would just personally like to see Cubberley remain in the mix for that. And so I just wanted to more report to my colleagues that some of the commissioners have expressed concern that Cubberley may never come through, given the years of effort that there has been. So there is a relatedness and a timing issue there that, we're doing what we can, but I think we've got two goals here that are interrelated in a very significant way. So that's one thing. The second thing is I wanted to just comment on, get the right number. 94, which is implement strategies for promoting unleaded fuel and phasing out leaded fuel. And I know we're actively doing that. And I wanted to commend our staff because I know that we have the fuel tank there and they've been watching legislation and have written, supported the mayor in writing to our state legislators to support phasing out leaded fuel there. I just think that's a really important item for our neighbors as well as for us. It's an environmental justice issue. It's something that I'm delighted to see in here and hope that we continue to pursue as aggressively as we can, given the complex FAA and other regulations. So those are my comments.
Councilmember Lithcott-Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to comment on Councilmember Vinker's statements or a comment on the pairing between items 77 Cubberley and 78 Recreation Wellness Center feasibility. As she said, these items are potentially related, potentially there's an overlap. And it sounds like the PRC is a little concerned about what if Cubberley doesn't happen. And as chair of the Cubberley Ad Hoc, I would encourage you to let the PRC know that our ad hoc has been meeting quite expeditiously. And while it would be inappropriate, of course, to give any details as those negotiations are happening in closed session, I think we can evince a confidence around the expeditiousness and the desire to reach some kind of outcome with Cubberley. And that's the best we can do for now. But I think that goes, some distance. I also want to support Councilmember Burt's statement about means restriction being a critical component of our efforts to support those who struggle with their mental health. And so I would be in support of it being in the capital plan. And I think perhaps also stated as an objective here, really so the public knows that this is a component of the issue that we are paying attention to. I want to remind everybody that grade separation, which is another long-standing issue, a massive set of conversations and ultimately projects, grade separation is also meant to be that means restriction ultimate achievement. It's not the only reason we're doing grade separation, but one of the tremendous benefits we get from grade separation is the train no longer intersects with the human plane. But grade separation, whatever those alternatives turn out to be, won't be upon us, won't be built out for years. And so in the meantime, we have this issue of better fencing and perhaps enhanced detection in different places as a way to bridge that gap. In terms of youth mental health more broadly, in my view, there are really 5 components when I think about the issue, tackling the issue, addressing the issue, not naive enough to think we can solve the problem completely. But there are 5 different buckets for me that I contemplate when I think about the issue. One is more resources for those who are struggling. The second is destigmatizing the issue so people are more comfortable accessing those resources. Number 3 is training more of us in the public to be that mental health first responder type person, as the city manager mentioned. because there aren't enough resources. We need more people at the very fundamental level to simply know more so they can do more. The fourth is strengthening means restrictions so that when people are pushed to that point, it is harder for them to choose to end their life. And finally, which I think we don't talk about enough, is how can we become the community that is willing to better understand why so many of our youth are struggling in the first place? A metaphor that I like to use is, in the case of a river and people falling into a river, whether we're providing more resources, destigmatizing, training more people to be helpful, increasing means restriction, that's like pulling people out of the river. They're already struggling. What are we doing to remove them from the struggle? I want us to be the community that goes upriver and finds out why so many people are falling in or jumping in. And so to conclude, as I've said, I would be in favor of adding enhanced means restriction to the capital plan, adding it as an objective under community health, safety, wellness, and belonging. And on number 81, increased support and funding for youth mental health. I would love an update from staff as to where we are in that objective. Because what I remember is on finance committee last year, this was a proposed budget item. And ultimately in the tier 2, we decided not to fund it, not because we don't care deeply and desperately about improving youth mental health, but because there weren't enough specifics yet attached to what those dollars might be spent on. So I'd love to have a sense of where we are. I feel the increased momentum. We've got the mayor's Blue Ribbon Commission. We've got, city schools talking about it. We've got our own staff working on stuff. We've talked about maybe a teen center in the downtown building on Bryant. We're getting a lot of swirling eddies almost around this issue. And I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure we're not overlapping, there aren't gaps, there aren't redundancies and lags. So I'd love to know what 81 feels like it's in furtherance of. Ms. O'Kane, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'm Kristen O'Kane, Community Services Director. So the youth mental health item, a portion of that is for an event that we are coordinating with our partners at Youth Community Service, Alcove, Project Safety Net, and both Pally and Gunn Wellness Centers, the wellness centers at their school. This will be an event that we're still vetting, but will likely be for both adults and teens with different breakout sessions to sort of focus on the needs for different age groups and whether it's a parent or a youth. We're working with our partners to further identify exactly what that event would be like. So part of that is to plan that event. And then the other piece, as City Manager Shikata mentioned, is partly a placeholder for now, but I do plan on having a more vetted proposal when we come to Finance Committee with our budget. It could be things that are informed by the Youth Mental Health Task Force, and then it could be also to support things that we hear as staff and our partner agencies here. For example, the Art Center and Library just completed a study that was done by a grant from Valley Med, and we heard a presentation on it today. And again, one of the things we hear is transportation. Kids do not have a way to get from their place to their third space. So whether it be the teen center on a Friday night, or whether it be the library or somewhere else where they go to feel safe and have a sense of belonging and feeling like they can be themselves in a place, they're not finding that they can even get there. So that's one thing I'd like to explore a little bit more, how we might be able to implement that. We are doing that a little bit with the free link rides for teens, knowing that that service ends at 6 p.m. at night. So it doesn't solve the issue of in the evenings or the weekends, but we plan on having something more detailed for you when we go to Finance Committee and then Council as part of our budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's it for me.
Hey, thank you, Councilmember Lithcott-Hames. Appreciate all your questions and focus around youth mental health, and definitely support adding language here around means safety, which I understand is kind of the direction that they're trying to go with the language rather than means restriction. So if we want to include means safety would be great. task force is looking at that, as well as I understand Project Safety Net has a subcommittee also working on that. So between those two and staff being able to help, I think we should be able to get some good short-term help there while we're waiting for grade separation, which will ultimately provide I think a much stronger solution for physical safety and means safety there. I think all my questions actually have been answered. So see if we can get around to then motions here. Councilmember Burt.
Yes. So first, let me give a couple comments. I'd be glad to do a motion. First, I wanted to follow up on Vice Mayor Lowing's comments on quiet zones, because at the Rail Committee, one of the things that we've recently discussed is that our efforts on doing quiet zones, we were initiating really as a quality of life initiative, that they're very disturbing to people who live very near the tracks and even people moderately away. But the thing that we had kind of forgotten about that was front and center a decade ago when we were really looking at what is it about the physicality of our community that contributes to the means that we've seen of suicides in our community. And we have a train system running right down the middle next to schools. And what the experts had explained to us, and I want to bring back up to the forefront, is that means availability is a real significant factor in suicides. And in some areas of the country, it's firearms near the front door and kids available to firearms or adults. In our community, one of the biggest factors is our train system. And what we have every 15 minutes when horns sound is a reminder of means. And it actually, experts believe that that's a contributing factor. So one of the benefits we'll get from quiet zones is that it does, in a way that we probably will never be able to quantify, it will contribute toward means restriction. So I just wanted to bring that forward. And then one little point on what Director O'Kane was talking about on teens and access to locations. I can tell you, as someone who is a bit older than many of those teens with their great energy and vitality, we have our community is readily bikeable. But what we have is we've had a decline in safe routes to school participation since COVID. And we have teams who are perceiving that riding to a location is somehow a barrier. And so just a small thought that I had been thinking about in the last week is, well, what incentivizes? Little things. If we have an Ada's punch gift card for every time a teen rides to the teen center versus driving, and they get a $10 gift certificate, I won't be surprised if that moves the dial significantly. Those little things can really happen. So just mention that. So lastly, I will move that we adopt the list of community health and safety and wellness and well-being projects 74 through 97 and add a number 95 and add an additional one, which is an objective of enhanced Caltrain safety and security, and leave it at that general, with an understanding that the implementation of that is not going to occur this year in all likelihood, but it will be a project that we will state clearly, and staff will begin to really focus on and come up with the plan.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Burt, do you want to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lithcott Ames? Okay. Councilmember Coop?
It must have been my knee. I'm sorry.
All right. I'll wait for the motion to be transcribed on screen. All right, let's call the vote.
Councilmember Tanaka. Councilmember Lithcott Ames.
Yes.
Mayor Stone.
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker.
Yes.
Councilmember Koo.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lowing.
Yes.
Councilmember Burt.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Wonderful, thank you. I believe we now are moving to, is it Policy and Services or Finance Committee?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. We're trying to figure out here what to do. All right, Clerk, if you could put up slide 9 for us. Thank you. Great. Next, we have the review of Finance and Policy and Services Standing Committee. This is an opportunity for the council to discuss and identify any adjustments to the Standing Committee work plans, including any updates or status of council referrals. And we just ask that council keep in mind that as we progress through the 2024 objectives, these committees will be used to review and provide feedback as appropriate to ensure progress on these objectives. And Ms. Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines and myself will swap as necessary to field any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Koo.
Thank you. I kind of jumped the gun earlier on asking for a referral for fire department to bring forward a discussion of what it's going to take in order for Station 2 and Station 4 to have water. At this point, we have only Station 5 that is out at south of Oregon and in the southwest area. So I think that, that's something I think people should know about how much it's going to cost in order to ensure these 2 fire stations are staffed and able to respond with engines that have water in them. So that's one of the referrals. Can I ask how you want to do this? If it's a motion I make and then we go one by one, or
Sorry, what do you mean one by one? Well, so we're just dealing with the Finance Committee.
yeah, it's
Yes,
all, I have a few for the Finance Committee to consider.
Okay. If you want to make the
Make-
motion for what you want to include, that's fine.
For all of them at once or for one by one?
How many do you have?
I have 2, 4. I have 4. Maybe one by one, if that's okay, so that you guys can consider and you can say no or yes to each of them as we go along.
Okay, let's give that a try.
Thank you. So the first one would be, I'd like to move that that it's referred to Finance Committee as to the fire stations 2 and 4, what it's going to cost in order to have it fully staffed with water. Yes, sir. I'm sorry,
Sorry,
through the
Mayor.
mayor.
If I might suggest that perhaps before, it might be useful if before you get to a motion, we could give you a staff perspective on where we are on the issue. Because in this case, I think we're already doing that. But in any case, let me ask Assistant City Manager Nose to report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Ku. Oops, sorry, sure. Okay. So subsequent to the release of this work plan, so I recognize it's not been written in here, but as staff have been going through budget proposals and the process for the FY 2025 budget, one of the due outs that we're taking on ourselves and expect to talk to the Finance Committee about as part of the May budget process is actually a follow-up on the future of kind of fire staffing, both water as well as ambulance or medical services. So staff are anticipating that that would be an item that we would bring back in the new fiscal year. So after July 1, so sometime in that kind of August, September, October, November timeframe.
So this is for the next fiscal year, not this fiscal year? If you bring it back in July?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so, well,
So now we'll talk about, obviously, as part of the FY 2025 budget process already in May with the Finance Committee as part of the broader discussion over funding, resource allocation, and the like. Given the financial magnitude to stand up that level of staffing, I think a phased approach is likely what staff would recommend.
thank you. In that case, I'm withdrawing my motion. Not that it got second, but but since you're working on it, thank you so much for the report. I'll move on to my, if that's okay with you, Mayor, for my second request, again to the Finance Committee. I think I brought it up at the original priority setting meeting that to ask for a 250,000 grant for Ability Path to move forward with their facilities for services in the Mitchell Park Place at 525 East Charleston Road. As you know, East Charleston, Mitchell Park Place is actually a housing for people with developmental disabilities, but they also have programs that will help the individuals learn how to live in the community and also to be able to work in the community, to be independent at some point. So the thing is, Mitchell Park Place is being built, funded, the housing part is being funded by the county, by other sources, but the facility itself is in need of funding in order to be able to open at the same time as when the residence is open. So they're looking to, Ability Path is going to be providing the services at Mitchell Park Place, and they're looking to have it built out and ready to go when Mitchell Park Place comes on board. But they're asking for 250,000 in order to start working on matching grants as well. So I'm hoping that we can refer that to Finance Committee for consideration. I know that is something that Finance Committee has already been talking about in terms of how to work the one-time grants, what the criteria is to provide these kind of grants to the community. So I think this might be something that we can add that can be further discussed for service to this community. I don't know if staff, if through the mayor, if staff has any updates or if the Finance Committee has any updates.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Ku again. You are timely in bringing this up, and to what Chair Burt actually discussed a little bit earlier, the Finance Committee has started to talk about the types of requests that are coming forward and the programs that we have. I think it's fair to say after the Finance Committee's most recent discussion, this particular request, we don't have a formal process that this would typically go through. So the resource allocation of funding is something I think that fits nicely with the Finance Committee's purview as they talk about the budget process this coming May. And this certainly is within the committee's prerogative to make a recommendation in terms of funding for something like this as part of that process. The more sustainable, longer sort of conversation over how could these types of requests come forward, what would that process be, I think is already part of the work plan that we discussed with the Finance Committee as part of the follow-up associated with the human services funding, the special events funding, and how we would want to navigate these kinds of requests prospectively.
I just want to make sure that I have not asked further, I have not spoken further with Ability Path in terms of their timeline. So I would want to find out if in the discussions on the criterias for these grants, whether, and human services, is that going to take, would it take a lot, much more longer, and that they might miss out on the opportunity for the FY 25 budget?
I think that's a fair observation. And so depending on the timing of the need of the funding, as well as the desire of the council, if there was an immediate need, you know, an allocation as part of the 2025 proposed budget process from the committee, I think would be the most expeditious way. However, like I said, that longer term, if it can be fit into a more prospective looking format, would have a longer time frame. So I don't know their timeline either. But I think those are the two paths in terms of an immediate versus something on a longer term basis.
Thank you. I'm just kind of hopeful that we can, either I can communicate and find out what the timeline is of their need, or if this is moving forward, I hope you'll give me instruction which way to go, whether staff or the finance committee will find out, or it's something that I need to find out. I just want to just say what Council Chair Burt of Finance Committee had mentioned, that oftentimes with these nonprofits, you know, if you provide the seed money, it becomes easier for them in order to branch out and to get matching funds, so forth. So I did not get the sense that this is something that is an ongoing ask. It's a one-time ask for them to get the facilities in order to be able to provide those programs. So I don't know if I need a motion on this, or is this something that is being considered to head over to Finance Committee? Is this something that's heading to Finance already, or should I make a motion in particular to this request for a grant of 250 towards Mitchell Park Place for its facility?
Councilmember Burt, would you like to answer that as Chair of the Finance Committee?
I think when we go to the motion, it would be fine to just have that as a clear referral. Yeah.
Staff nodding their heads, seems like they agree. Okay.
Are we
Great.
doing a motion by one, or? I mean, Councilmember Burt said when we go to motion, so.
Well, why don't you go ahead and make the motion now? And then I know you got two more that quite significantly over time, so we can try to make them a little more succinct.
Thank you, ma'am.
So if you want to make the motion, go ahead.
Yes, so I did.
Okay, is there a second?
Oh, so we're going to vote separately on each of these? All right, I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Burt. Any discussion?
No, I think I said everything.
Okay. See no lights, let's take the vote.
Vice Mayor Lowing,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
No.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes,
Yes.
Mayor Stone,
Yes,
motion carries 6-1.
thank you.
Thank
Your
you.
next-
My next one is actually another one to the Finance Committee. Actually, this is for personnel staff that I would like to ask that they consider hiring a biologist. It's an important part. Right now, most of staff, we don't have somebody who is who can look at things based on science. And I think one of the projects that I would say that this would benefit from is, I think, our golf course maintenance and upkeep that Fish and Game had put, I believe, mandates on in terms of keeping it natural. I don't know the entire terms, but I think that our city would benefit from having a biologist on board who would know how to advise on waterways and biological resources, including how we look at our creek for wildlife and fish and game, and also ensuring that the nests and migratory birds are not impacted when there is uses in our open space. So I think that that might be a benefit to the city to have someone who is who's professional science biologist, and to help us with our natural the natural part of our environment, SCAP. So that I would put that as a motion to for Finance Committee to also consider the cost of whether that is something that we should have on our staff. Is the staff one? No.
I would just comment perhaps that Councilmember, you've identified a specific position. At the same time, I think you've also raised interest in the topic area. And as a budgetary matter, maybe best to focus on the latter, such as where there's an interest in increased resources for the particular function. It may or may not be a specific position of a biologist that we might recommend. So given the issue that you raised, if this were referred to the Finance Committee again, I think it would be a discussion in the context of budget recommendations as to how best to respond to the concern raised.
So that would entail what is the increased cost to implement some of these programs versus having a staff member that knows science and would make recommendations to the programs and how to resolve them?
Yes. I would note that, again, in the context of the budget discussions, I'm envisioning something of staff responding to this question of how are we resourced to address these issues, and really engaging in a discussion with the Finance Committee if there's an impression that that's not sufficient, and what additional resources might enable us to do. Again, to be quite frank, I'm not in a position at this moment to be able to respond as to how we would address that issue. So that's the kind of conversation we want to have with staff before bringing it back to finance. And ultimately for the city council through your budget deliberations. I can tell you, as it is shaping up today, we are not looking at adding significant staff to this budget, given the expectations of revenues for the upcoming year. So in the absence of additional information, again, being 30 days out from your receiving a proposed budget, I can tell you that we're probably not going to be able to add that at this point. But we can engage in a discussion of the topic area and where we are.
Well, then I appreciate that, and I would withdraw from asking for the staff member, but I do think that it is important for us to address, I don't know if we're in compliance yet with Fish and Game over the golf course area for the natural environment over there. So I do think that that's something that we should start addressing. And with that, I will not go with my fourth one because it's also a staffing matter, and I do hear that we're not able to add any more staff at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right then. I saw Councilmember Vinker and Councilmember Burt's light came on during that. Was that Councilmember Vinker?
Yes, thank you. And Councilmember Koo, are you maintaining your request for referral for the subject matter area? Okay, because I did want to speak to that because I think that it would be helpful to have a referral to explore, sort of as you said, City Manager, how are we resourced with respect to issues like this? I'd like to suggest that it could include explaining to us, whether having a dedicated staff member that's maybe not it could be a biologist, a zoologist, an earth science, but something that could help us on a variety of issues, whether or not that would be cheaper and there would be budget room if we avoid retaining certain external resources. I don't know the answer, but I would be interested in the question because I think there's a lot of issues that come up sort of, individually where this is in play, whether we're talking about mitigation on the golf course, which we'd like to get more current on, whether we're talking about, migratory patterns in the Baylands, and whether we're talking about feral cats, whether we're talking about a variety of issues, this comes up. And it may or may not be more efficient to have someone on staff, which maybe we have someone like that. I'm not aware of it. And I think it's something that I would at least like to be briefed on, and it seems like finance could be a good place to do that. So I would support what you just said.
Councilmember Burt.
Yeah, just my thoughts on the same subject. I wasn't supportive of a focus on what it would cost to do it, but I do think that what we need is an understanding of how do we currently address those issues, and then go from there on what gaps or needs there may be. I'm not at all convinced that a single individual is going to have the expertise and the range of issues. I mean, we say biologists, but let me just tell you, that's a big, broad field. And this is, what we're describing here is a breadth of expertise in areas that typically goes beyond even one individual, but we can have a discussion on just how we currently meet those requirements.
Councilmember Vinker.
Yes, agreed. And it might be a person who could help us figure out who the external person is more efficiently and garner some of those resources. So yes, to all that you said, I'm just very curious about looking at those resources and understanding what we do, or as you said, gap analysis. So, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Koo.
I just, thank you very much. Because there's also not only what Councilmember Vinker and Councilmember Burt said to oversee, but also, recommendations from somebody with that knowledge in terms of restoration of these natural environments to attract more little creatures or even big creatures. But, that natural part of it. So I just want to say thank you for supporting it, and that staff will work on making sure that these services and programs are there. I don't want to, I'm not, how do you say, wanting my next resource person, but I did want to say that, in the Historical Resources Board, we used to have an expert who came and gave the Historic Resource Board expertise on historical matters, on building and so forth. And while Ms. French is very versed at it, I just think that at this point, we want to be looking forward and ensuring that we do have someone as a backup for whatever reason. Because that is a specialized field. So I know that it's not for FY25 or anytime soon, but definitely to keep a close eye on that position and make sure that we still have somebody who can advise and guide the Historic Resources Board moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights, I'll go ahead and move approval of the Finance Committee work plan for 2024.
Second.
Thank you. I don't need to speak to it.
Nor I.
Great. Any discussion? All right, then we'll take the vote on approving the Finance Committee work plan with the prior addition from Councilmember Ku's motion.
I think it was Councilmember Vinker who seconded it.
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka.
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lowing,
Yes.
Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Ku.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. Move on to the last part of this item, which is the Policy and Services 2024 work plan.
Good evening, everyone. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager. Great to be here with you all this evening. The proposed work plan in front of you captures all the referrals that we are aware of, with the exception of one related to the Public Art Commission that came from the City Council in December. So we have since added that to the work plan. It'll go in the month of May. And the other thing I will note is, as the City Council is in the process of choosing a city auditor, the audit reports have been held. And so we anticipate that some of the items that we have tentatively placed on here as audit reports will actually bump back to the later part of the year, as we can agendize those in process with other items on the agenda. That's it.
Great, thank you. Back to council then for discussions, additions, or motions. Councilor Lithcott Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Cotton Gaines, thank you so much. As a new member of the Policy and Services Committee, I find myself curious as to how this work plan compares to that over the last 5 years. And I wonder if you could point me to, rather than me trying to search for when this topic came up last year and the year before and the year before and the year before, would it be possible, just as an aside, at some point for someone to find the prior year's work plans so that I have a greater sense of the context of what this committee typically covers?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Lithcott Haynes. I can provide the committee with the actual items that went to committee over the past 5 years. That's probably the more accurate one. The nature of some items at Policy and Services, unfortunately, is it moves a lot. It's a wide variety of bodies of work that involve multiple departments. And so in general, it is council referrals that come there. The procedures and protocols handbook, which you all very intimately know at this point. Other policy items that relate to the city council and the departments. And so it varies very widely, but I can provide that to the members of the council for sure for the actions taken in the last 5 years.
Thank you. I guess I'm just seeing a lot of open slots potentially, given that our auditor situation is in flux. And I'm finding myself wanting to know, well, what should we be doing? Not wanting to make work for us, but also not wanting to overlook some topics that perhaps are ripe for reconsideration or, to be looked at again because it's been a while. So I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And to the point of gaps, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see you unmuting, but thank you for giving me the moment. We do have a few items that will be coming even in the gaps for the auditor. For example, in the April meeting, we'll be bringing the draft scope related to the independent police auditor contract so that the committee can review that. That contract expires in January of 2025. So we want to start the request for proposals process. So though that wasn't reflected here as we were going through that contract, we realized that's something that does actually need to be discussed, and we want to bring that forward. So I would say in general, if there are items that we know that this committee needs to weigh in on as staff is doing our regular work, if there's a gap, we'll try to slot it in as appropriately as possible in context with the chairperson.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vinker?
Thank you, Mayor Stone, and thank you, Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines. I remembered that broad body of work from PNS last year. I wanted to ask just about one specific topic, and that is our seismic ordinance update, which I see on the pending referrals list. It's the third item there. It was also on our community health, safety, wellness, and belonging priority objectives that we just approved. Item 91 was approved consulting contract to initiate work, including stakeholder engagement related to the seismic and resiliency ordinance. And here I see it pending. And I recall that we had to delay it a little bit because with the one margin thing is, I think, cutting line a little bit. So what I'm wondering is, could you, with those three things in mind, could you give me a sort of a status update or outlook on our seismic work? Because last year it did come to PNS and I was quite happy about that because I think it'd been a long time coming and we were getting going. And so where are we now? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I don't see Mr. Lade in the room. So I think the best that I can provide in this moment is I know that staff is following up based off of the conversation that they had with policy and services last year in context of other projects that they have going in the department. But with the follow-up from committee is that they're still moving forward with it.
Okay, so we have it on our priority objectives, but it's pending here. So is it just that it's waiting for its time slot, or are we like, just how mechanically does that work?
It will follow the council objective. So as whatever the deadline is on here, is it I
think it's Q4.
Q4. So within this calendar year, I expect some sort of update from the department.
Okay. Maybe when we get our next one margin progress update, we can also be told how we're doing on what the impact is on seismic, if it can still get done by Q4. I'm hoping it can, but I understand we've had to rejigger things a little this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burt?
Thank you. So a couple things. First, under the council action needed to retain, we have from all the way back in November 2021, an item to look at strategies to support and strengthen neighborhood programs and do a gap analysis, et cetera. And so can you update me why that has not proceeded and why we need to have a council action to get it moving again?
There was a presentation that came to the committee in 2021 to get more context around what the committee was interested in discussing based off this referral. And with the amount of staff time required for the follow-up, we have not had that item higher prioritized in the time since. And Mr. Shikata can add more.
Sure. I just add a little bit of context. I believe this was brought forward by a colleague's memo. That's right. It does say that initiated by Councilmember Cormack, including a proposal to establish a neighborhood ambassadors program. So really, I think was the magnitude of work involved that didn't allow it to move forward at the time. And so I think given that we have progressed on the neighborhood town halls and related programs, that staff is suggesting that we need an affirmation from council whether you want to keep this on the plate.
Okay, thanks for that reminder. So I I think I concur that the specific proposal of this ambassador program and what went with it was a particular approach to how we could strengthen our relationships with neighborhood groups and help support them. And I think it's well taken too that the town halls have been a valuable step in addressing this broad objective. But I'd be interested in referring back to the Policy and Services Committee for consideration of what we should do in addition to what we're doing, if anything. I think it's an important question. And what triggered some of this, I think, is kind of out of COVID. We've seen that we had a pause on a lot of neighborhood block parties. Not everybody's brought them back. And that still hasn't happened. And so did we get a disruption in some really valuable aspects of our community engagement that go into this topic of community well-being and health? And neighborhoods really are a vital sense of belonging in the community. And so without giving specific direction, I'd like to refer this back to Policy and Services in a more open-ended way. Next, and I'll be ready to add that to a motion when we get to it. The next bullet is the Cal CHA follow-ups. And I can't remember that acronym. What is that? Sounds like I'm not the only one that doesn't have a tip of his tongue.
I put the screenshot on the back and I'm laughing that also didn't define the acronym. So my apologies, but it's Community Housing Funding Agency.
This is a financing tool for affordable housing development. And again, I don't know that we've got the key staff that are knowledgeable about it, but as I recall, the committee did have extensive discussions on this topic, and it was somewhat challenging to be able to move forward. Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines.
I think that's a good summary. When the committee heard it, there was a question of the amount of resources it would take to actually implement such a program here in Palo Alto, especially hearing some feedback of mixed reviews in some of the other communities in which it had been implemented. So while the intention was something that our council had interest in exploring, it didn't necessarily seem to be the correct fit based off of the summary at committee at that time.
Well, and if I recall correctly, we've referred kind of affordable housing ways to resource that to the housing ad hoc. So that sounds like it's covered there. All right. Last thing. Actually, two things. I'm sorry. Can I run over? Okay. First is we have lapsed as a council on having regular semi-annual or whatever joint meetings with different boards and commissions. And we tend to kind of lose touch with them if we don't do that at some frequency. Doesn't have to be annually, but we don't have that as part of our regular scheduling. And which goes into the other related item I have, which is whether it's for the standing committees, and we look at this and we go, oh yeah, every January we do this thing. And this goes to some of what Councilmember Lithcott-Hames was talking about. Well, what if the previous year's schedule has been like? And the reason for looking that is to see what are the repeat patterns that we have both for the standing committees every year and for the council. And it not only makes sure that we don't forget something, but that we as council members going into it can look and go, oh, okay, this is the template, and then we add certain things on top of it. And we just don't have those. And I've for years been asking for the council to do that. And I realize same thing applies here in these standing committees, if for no other reason than for agenda setting. So that when we really look at an annual ebb and flow over the course of a year, we've got certain periods of the year get really stacked up, certain things that we know going in are going to be in that period, certain things that just stack up before vacation, before the end of the year. And we just don't go about that with kind of a more deliberate understanding of the framework going in, and then we build off of that framework every year. So I'd like to refer that to P&S to work on having those, I'll call them templates for annual repeat agendas or something to that effect for both the Policy and Services and Finance Committee and for the council, and let the Policy and Services Committee work with staff on coming up with those that would be just part of the kind of administrative record that makes us function more efficiently and effectively going forward and transparently to everybody.
Thank you. Councilman Lithcott-Hames.
Thank you. I forgot one more item. Sorry about that. Ms. Cotton Gaines, in PNS last month, I believe, you raised, I raised, somebody raised the issue of CEDAW, which is the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and how the HRC had unanimously recommended back in 2018 that council take it up. Council did take it up later that year and unanimously directed PNS and staff to work on an ordinance. And it hasn't happened yet. And you indicated that it is in the work plan. I'm not seeing it here on this document. Remind me, is that because it's coming directly to council? Is that what we decided? It's not coming to PNS first?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. Our plan was to bring it to the full council, unless it, in our work of developing it, veers a little from what we previously discussed with policy and services. We thought that it would be best to just bring that one straight back to council, given the legislative record of it having been at committee previously.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And if I can respond to one of the other points raised by Councilmember Byrd as well, there have been some questions regarding boards and commissions and maybe reviewing the timeline of chairperson selection, as well as work plan coming to council, as well as a discussion of some sort between the commission and the full city council. And so we were going to draft some ideas to bring to policy and services this year related to that. So if you want to add it to the work plan, that's fine. We have some thoughts internally as well.
Thank you. Councilman Ku.
I guess I did it again, but so yes, thank you. I think I used my need to do it, but I do have something I wanted to ask. So we have the nonprofit contracts for services here in the city, and I know some of them are expiring probably in 2025, since I heard you bring up the police auditor's scope. I was wondering if those nonprofit services contracts that are expiring in 2025 might be able to be reviewed by policy and services as well for its scope and also its performance.
Councilmember Ku, there are two things that come to mind when you reference this. The first one are contracts that are already in place, like you were noting, the police independent auditor contract that we use for services. We do have an outstanding referral, or not referral, I guess I should say, an audit with recommendations that staff is going to pick up that work in the coming months of this year. And that one had a much broader range of discussion of nonprofit contracts for services. It went over things like HISRAP, it went over leases that were at below market rates and the like. Are you connecting these two, or I guess, can you provide a little bit more clarity when you talk about the contracts?
Yeah, things like, I know that we just recently, or not too long ago, have renewed downtown streets team and so forth. There is also, maybe even Alta Housing, but Avenidas, whatever else we might have with partnerships, whether providing a service for our city, which we might not have the resources or expertise in. So if those contracts are coming due in 2025, whichever ones they are, it would be something that I would like to have policy and services review and also participate in looking at the scope in terms of what is needed now. Maybe it's outdated what we have in the contracts, knowing what our community needs, what are the costs, as well as what are the performance measures in ensuring that our contracts are performing to what we need today.
Just to confirm, that is a part of the staff work plan. And again, in prior discussions with the council, we've referred to it as follow-up to the audit on nonprofit agreements. So that is on the staff work plan. And as had been discussed previously, the plan is, as soon as the work is underway, to come back to the city council with a study session to talk about the overall scope and approach to that work to ensure that it addresses the issues you've raised.
Right, I just don't want to miss out on those ones that are expiring pretty soon and that we do not continue with what we have currently, but to renew it based on what we need today in our communities.
Point well taken. Yes, we'll ensure that we include that.
Okay, then I don't need to do anything else. Thank you, sir.
All right. Councilmember Burr, I know you want to make a motion with those additions? Great.
Sure. So I would move the staff recommended work plan for policy and services with the following additions. One is to add to the work plan and for P&S review of an annual schedule of repeat items that go every year on the agenda for Policy and Services Committee, Finance Committee, and City Council, along with the approximate month that they occur. Okay, and then a second referral to the work plan is for Policy and Services Committee to establish a frequency for joint council meetings or P&S meetings with boards and commissions. Just a side note, it may be that some of the boards and commissions would most effectively meet with P&S. And then third, under the items for needed to retain, for the November 2021 council referral on neighborhood programs, to request for P&S to review and make recommendations for any initiatives to support and strengthen neighborhood programs.
You're done? I'll second.
Councilmember, do you need to speak to your motion?
I'm good.
Okay. Councilmember Ku?
I'm good too.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Congains.
If I could just ask a clarification question on the second one as it's being pulled up for joint meetings with the City Council or Policy and Services Committee for boards and commissions. Would that recommendation also allow for space for if it's the chairperson representing the entire commission, or is this intended to be the entire commission meeting with the council or the committee?
It was referring to what we had historically had was periodic joint meetings. So not not particularly the chair. I think we can still have, those chair meetings can occur outside of this directive.
Thank you.
Councilman Lithcott-Hames.
Yes, I'd like to ask the maker whether you consider the Palo Alto Youth Council to be one of the boards and commissions that we would invite to meet.
Well, good point, because that is one that we used to meet with. It's a council, not a commission per se. And yes, I'd like to include that. And maybe it's just we leave it as its own addition. So boards, commissions, and youth council.
Thank you.
Is it acceptable to the seconder?
Yes.
Great. Councilmember Vinker.
Yeah, I think you kind of covered this in Ms. Cotton Gaines' question to Councilmember Burt, but the PNS meeting last year where all the BCC chairs came was really effective. And it was interesting because it was just the chairs and we could kind of collectively compare and contrast their needs and wants and desires. So I assume this can cover that as well?
Oh, yeah. And I misunderstood then the question. I thought it was individual board chairs. You're talking about a joint
It may have
meeting of-
been. I'm just asking about this.
Was it
I'm asking for
joint
some
meeting?
flexibility in the recommendation, however you'd like to do that.
Okay, so I hadn't meant for that to necessarily replace the joint meetings, but yes, I'd be glad to have PNS include maybe we just put put comma youth council and then comma and meetings with board and commission chairs, and just leave it that open. Seconder?
Yes. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Lowing.
Yes, I just had one quick question in the interest of being flexible. I presume that item number 2 doesn't presume that basically anything, that this is being referred to PNS and they can decide. And if they say these 3 commissions, we don't recommend that there's anything scheduled, these 2 we definitely recommend. It's that level of
It was
flexibility.
deliberately open for PNS to make recommendations to the council.
Great.
All right. See no other lights. Once the clerk is done with the motion, we can take the vote.
Councilmember Koo,
Yes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lowing,
Yes.
Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. We are finally done with that item. It only took us about a month. So that's good. All right, moving on to our last action item, policy and services recommendation to the city council for the creation of a citizens advisory committee on a potential charter amendment on council member compensation. This item has been continued twice. Is there any staff report or policy and services presentation?
Nothing new from staff.
Okay, would the chair of policy and services like to introduce this for us?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Stone. On December 4th, 2023, Policy and Services Committee was tasked with providing council with a recommendation on the creation of a Citizens Advisory Committee to evaluate higher compensation beyond state law limits, which is SB 329. The Citizens Advisory Committee evaluation may result in placing a charter amendment for voters' consideration and vote. And there was a discussion at Policy and Services Committee, and we're recommending the following parameters for council to consider. that it has an application process for 15 members, that it is a Brown Acted committee. We estimate that it might take 2 to 3 months for application process to get applicants and making sure that it's well advertised. Once constituted, the committee shall conclude its work within 12 months and recommend to council whether compensation for council members should be increased above the state maximum of 1,600 per month, and if so, what that increase should be. The committee shall research comparable cities to determine how other cities provide salary increases to their council members. The committee shall be broadly representative of Palo Alto communities and shall have at least 4 members who have former municipal government experience to help scope context. No one currently in the pipeline to run for city council again. If an increase is recommended, have a recommendation to council for ballot measure. Yeah, so that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we will go to public comment.
Our first speaker is Liz G.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, I would like to just comment tonight again on increase of, I guess, a stipend for the council of City Council of Palo Alto. I do want to suggest that in some way I've heard members talk about this stipend as comparing it to a minimum wage job. And I do want to point out to the council and the public that I work a minimum wage job and it's really tough. It's long hours, obviously overworked and underpaid. And I find very little joy in the work that I do. I would love to get a raise to, a living wage or, commensurate with what the economy here is in Palo Alto. So as much as I think that the stipend that is provided to City Council probably is due and deserves to be raised, I'm just simply stating that comparing such to that of a minimum wage job, or as if it was a minimum wage job on an hourly basis, it doesn't really sit well with me. It doesn't feel like it's empathetic or compassionate towards those out there that really are working these types of jobs, 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week, 1, 2, or 3 jobs. So but again, I would like to also just stick on here that one of the things that would probably be deserved of an increase in stipend, which I have not heard the council talk about, is a policy around artificial intelligence, along with housing, along with equity, along with inclusion, along with gender neutrality and, healthcare for all, including women. We are really in a place right now where artificial intelligence is taking over our lives, isn't going to be impacting low wage, minimum wage jobs. And I have heard nothing, as far as I know, that the city council has come out and had a policy about. This is national news, it's international news, it's statewide news. So that being said, I hope in the near future, you guys would get together and talk about the impacts of AI on those who work low wage, minimum wage jobs. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Aram J.
Okay, so I'm going to be a little more stream of consciousness than I usually am. I don't have a lot of points that I want to discuss, but here's something I've been thinking about. I think rather than go into the substantive issues that need to be discussed, I do think an advisory committee with a cross-section of the community makes sense. I think it would be gross if I was on on the city council and I said I wanted to have a couple thousand more dollars to line my pockets. So, are we going to give, as an example for the substantive issues, the multimillionaires on the city council stipend? They're already getting probably double health care and a variety of benefits. Or are we really, I thought I heard Julie Lithcott-Haynes at one point say, what we really want to do is draw people that would never be able to have the ability to be on the council, be on it, which means, first of all, we're talking about $125,000, $150,000 a year. We might have to, ask Ed to step aside, and we could split his salary into four, and we'd have four council members that could now qualify to run from a low income perspective. Secondly, I don't like that our council members are elected district wide, and I think the conversation could be expanded to have district representatives. Okay. It's really hard, particularly when you're a regular dissenter, to try to get anybody to talk with you about, for instance, putting, the conflict, the killing in Gaza on the agenda. Nobody wants to talk to you on the council, but I think that would change if we had districting and I could really rail at my one representative and then come back and rail at the council generally. Okay. So if you're going to give stipends and things, you got to have a way, and you're going to keep a preponderance of millionaires. And look, okay, you're millionaires, great, on there. Do you all really want to take these stipends and these benefits, or is there a way for you to decline with honor to do that? And really, really, let's turn this around. Let's have council members be full-time staff, full-time employees. Okay. I've heard, again, Julie Lithcott-Haynes and others complain that you get 800 pages. That's not something that can be done, in my estimation, with an extraordinary balance where you're not just getting your nose, being pulled around by Ed Chicata and the staff. It should be the city council members that come from our city that are paid a decent wage, $125,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year, and then get full-time staff members. So it's not out-of-city people running the city for their own benefits. They're constant higher and higher wages. So those are a few things I'd like you to think about moving forward.
That concludes public comment on action item 3.
Thank you. Back to council for questions, discussion, and motions. Councilmember Vinker.
Thank you, Mayor Stone, and thank you to my colleagues on Policy and Services for looking into this council referral, and my colleagues who originally brought the colleagues memo forward that led to this. I think it is an important topic, and as we all seem to concur last time, we are looking to make it council service more accessible for more people. So I have a question and a comment about the proposal before us from PNS. Let me ask my question, if through the mayor, if it's okay, if I don't know if my colleagues who've proposed this could answer. But I'm just curious about the number 15, why 15 members? And I see that at least 4 have to have former municipal government experience. Sounds like a lot to try to get to consensus on something. There's 7 of us and we talk through things a lot. So I'm just curious if someone could explain to me the rationale and thinking behind the number 15.
Turn it to the chair of PNS.
Well, each of us had a different opinion of how many on the committee. It was going to bring in more diverse voices with the number 15. We had numbers from 3 to 5, 7 to 10, or 5 to 7, and then there's a 15. So with the 15, there's more opportunities for people with the professional background to advise us, like the 4 in having municipal representation and experience. But yeah, it was just finally coming to a number to move it forward.
Yeah,
and it's a recommendation.
Yeah, I love the idea of getting a lot of diverse voices. I think that's kind of the point of this effort. But I see only 4, there's only like one category of people. So I wonder if we should either reduce it a little, maybe to 11, or add another, category or so. I don't have any immediate recommendations for that. It's just a question that rose to my mind. But I do have one thought on a different aspect, the second to last bullet point, sorry. Second to last bullet point says no one currently in the pipeline to run again. And I take the thought behind that and concur with it, but I wonder if a way to better articulate that could be something akin to what is used with the redistricting commission. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the California Redistricting Commission, that happens every 10 years to, draw the lines in the state for various electoral districts. When one applies to become a member of the Redistricting Commission to advise the state legislature on where those lines should be drawn, you have to affirm or attest that you will not run for office for a period of X years, might be 5, I don't remember exactly. I did that, 15 years ago, whenever the first one was. And that's sort of an easy way that somebody can self-select, say, you know what, this won't affect me in the next X years. And it's just a little more concrete. So I would suggest that we, when we do the resolution, we do something along those lines. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Lowing.
Thank you very much. So the referral item that's now back is what type of committee, the makeup of the committee, would we like to have take a look at this issue for an increase, and then come back to us, and we'll decide from there if it goes to a ballot or not. I watched the entire P&S committee, and I'm glad you guys wrestled with so many varieties of issues, as is often done on P&S for those of us that were on last year, right? And I liked the breadth, and there was a lot of breadth. But among the options that had support early on in that debate were around a 5-person committee made up with people of expertise on such matters as are being considered here. And one suggestion was to have some HR experts. Ms. Cotton Gaines actually even suggested that former council members should be on there because of their experience. And when I think of what you're proposing here, which is a very large group, which would take quite a long time to put together and process, and years of work, I gravitate back towards where the committee was at the beginning of their debate. And I think that approach makes sense. What do we need? We need experience, and we need credibility in the recommendations back to council. I think we need a nimble committee of about 5, not 15. And when I think about who would provide that, I think a diverse committee made up of prior council members from across the board would be an excellent lineup. And why do I say that? Well, first of all, they're fully aware of the issues that the colleagues memo is intending to address with respect to bringing new kinds of people onto council. And they've lived in the job for between 4 and 8 years. So they know what the job is, and they understand the workload dynamics and the time commitments and so on, which is also mentioned in the colleagues memo. The process could be that the mayor could select a diverse group and we could get started immediately. What that advantage is it gives us a shot of getting a recommendation to council this year, not next year, so that we could possibly still make the August ballot deadline. If we don't make the August ballot deadline, no action can be taken that would be actionable on a future council member until 2027, because we'll miss the 24 ballot. These folks can solicit public comment as part of the process from any group of people that they want. So we don't have to pre-select 20 to make the decisions. And I really think they'll bring really strong credibility to the recommendations they make because of what I said. Now, I think about you know, why is this better than a 15-person committee? Well, just give you two examples. One is that this is a much narrower, this is a group that needs to be experienced on the narrow issue of council work and council compensation. A contrasting example is the Housing Element Working Group, which I was on, which was about 20 people, which was very effective in their assignment. And that assignment was to look at all of the possible housing types over the next 8 to 10 years and bring up that perspective so that nothing was missed. That's just very different, broader, and it's very different than a narrow issue of compensation recommendation to council for a ballot initiative. And with respect to getting enough people who are independent, at the end of the day, if this goes to the ballot, there'll be 40,000 people making a judgment on this. Not us, not this committee. They're called the voters. So I'm not worried about independence in terms of how people ultimately think about whatever is recommended, if anything's recommended. And then secondly, I've mentioned, or I've referred to it, is the process and the speed really argue against a much larger group. As the committee said, it will take months to set this group up. We have to vet them, we have to negotiate, we have to choose these members. And then they're suggesting a year of deliberation, which I frankly don't think is necessary because we already have data from all the other areas in terms of what other folks do. And we've vetted some other things in advance. But I wouldn't put any constraint on that. So this independent committee, if they say we need a year, I wouldn't put a constraint on that. But that's a better direction, I think, for where we need to go. And it's a superior way to get recommendations back to council. So I would like to make a motion in that regard that I've sent over to the clerk.
Second.
So I think PNS was very effective in venting and looking at all the options. And I liked where they started more than where they ended up is kind of my thanks to the committee. So.
Hey, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Lithcott-Hames, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. Let the record reflect that I've been growled at by the colleague to my right. So tenuously, I offer my support for this motion. Here's why. Councilmember Lowing, I really appreciate that you watched that PNS conversation because it was quite a conversation of the three of us really express the breadth and depth of our feelings on this subject. And my perspective happened to be similar to yours. It did not win the day in the motion that ultimately ensued, but it was similar, although you have improved upon what I had suggested back at that committee meeting. So it doesn't surprise me that you've improved upon it because you were on the original colleagues memo. So I appreciate that you're helping us understand what perhaps you were having in mind all along. I agree with you that a smaller group is inherently more nimble, that a group of experts who have been in the role are the ones most able to understand the scope of the work, the challenge of it, how it should be compensated, and just in terms of the timing of getting something on the ballot, I agree with you that an expeditious process serves us. And just want to remind people that the reason we're talking about this in the first place is not to pad anybody's pockets up here. It's really about trying to make council service more accessible to a broader swath of our community. Conservatively, I think people up here estimate that council work is approximately 25 hours a week, which is $10 an hour, given what we're paid. Many of us would say it's upwards of 40 hours a week, and some would say it's even more. 40 hours a week equates to $6.25 an hour. The city has over 1,000 employees and 7 make less than minimum wage. Therefore, council is a position a person can't remotely contemplate going for if they need to earn a living in order to pay their bills. Therefore, a critical perspective is almost by definition missing when we keep council compensation so low. We are de facto ensuring that council members are those with enough outside income or assets such that they can spend 25 to 40 hours a week or more working for the city and earning very little income from it. We are having this conversation because a number of us think that that's just depriving the city of leadership and representation from a set of folks who are effectively excluded from it because they can't afford to do it.
Thank you. Councilmember Burt?
Yeah, so first, I wholeheartedly agree that 15 is a crazy number. It seems like the suggestions got added together on the numbers. And I think getting enough people who are even interested in participating in this will be a challenge. I do support Councilmember Vinker's concept on how to filter out any self-interest. And I think that, but I don't support this all being made up of former council members. I think that that knowledge would be an important component to the committee, but it should not be left to just that that perspective. And I also, it doesn't speak anywhere that I can find how these folks would be appointed, although now it didn't, I should say. I don't think this should be a mayoral appointment. This is an important issue that it represent diversity, and having all these appointed by the mayor is not something that we've done in the past. We've had different mechanisms. Either we bring candidates forward and vote on them by a council, or in some cases, we've had each council member appointing one member. Either of those I'd be fine with. And I'll just say that one of the things as we look at this, it reminded me that we don't have in our procedures and protocols, to my recollection, guidelines on how we appoint task forces or advisory committees. And we've used a couple of different mechanisms in the past. And I think this is something that, an item that should come back up in our procedures and protocols. And lastly, I've heard all the good arguments on either side of this. We just increased our compensation significantly recently. We've had a long time outlook that these are volunteer positions, and that we are public servants, not politicians. And so I've been ambivalent about this. I was game to go ahead with the consideration, but I don't see the critical urgency. I think we should do it. I don't have any inclination to drag it out, but I don't see a pressing urgency to get it on this ballot. If it's ripe, great. If it's not, I don't see a real problem with having it roll over, given that we just had these increases in council compensation. And so for those reasons, I won't be able to support the motion.
Councilmember Koo.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with me in this switch, but I don't have anything to say. Thank you.
No worries. Councilmember Vinker.
Thank you, Mayor Stone. I would like to first offer the friendly amendment that we add that committee members must agree not to run for council for at least 5 years following the issuance of a recommendation. Is that something that the maker would accept?
Sure.
And the seconder? Raleigh? Sorry.
Forgive me. Could you repeat what you said?
Sure, yeah, I was just offering a friendly amendment that committee members must agree not to run for council for at least 5 years following the issuance of the committee's recommendation.
Yes, I'll accept that.
Okay, thank you. And then I wanted to suggest, perhaps for discussion or feedback, that that this be, I also would like to see some non-council members join the council members. I think that perspective of having not served and what it would take to want to serve, in addition to the very important, I agree with you, the very important perspective of having served and what that requires. And so I would like to see that there be some other members. And so I would suggest, just for discussion purposes, that we have a committee of 7 members, 4 of which are former council members. And I would just comment that I'm sort of agnostic as to the timing of the ultimate. I think it would be nice to assemble this quickly, move quickly, but I'm not concerned about it getting on necessarily this year. That's just my view. But anyway, so I'm curious how the maker feels about the size of the committee and whether or not it could be constituted with any non-former council members.
Accepted.
Thank you. Seconder?
Same.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Tanaka.
So as was mentioned, we just gave ourselves, well, not me, but voted for like, I think a 60% increase recently, which I think is probably the largest of all the staff so far. Admittedly, we are starting from a low base, but to me, when we're trying to fast track this, it just, even if maybe it is right, it wouldn't seem right to a lot of people in the city. I think it's really important that we tread carefully here. I think the motivation to try to get rush it onto the August ballot, which would be a rush. I mean, I've been on there for a while and I've never seen anything move so fast. So we really have to rush to get it for the August ballot. I think it would be a mistake. And I think there'd be a lot of backlash. So I think we should be careful, deliberate about this, mindful that, as a lot of you guys know, I work in the tech sector, but a lot of people in the tech sector have got layoffs, more layoffs than probably, I don't know, maybe since the Great Recession, but it's pretty ugly. And so for us to be giving ourselves a raise, again, back to back, I think would not seem right. Would not seem right to me. Would not seem right to a lot of people who've been laid off. In tech sector, people are not getting raises. I mean, if anything, salaries are going down, even for the people who are able to get a job. So it's going the other way right now. So I think this is out of line, out of place, and to rush it, to me, just is absolutely not the right direction. My other issue with having, incredibly high wages for council members is, and one thing I like about Palo Alto is that, serving on city council, serving on planning commission, serving on any of the boards and commissions that we have really is a passion project for the people that serve. It's not we don't do it out of the money. We do it because we want to help the city we live here. And what this does by having, substantially, this is like, much, much higher than I think anyone has ever been contemplated. It starts creating like a professional political class. And I don't know if the city is served better that way, or whether it's served by people who have less financial interest in the being on council. So I have lots of issues with this. The other thing is, I think the idea that something so important as this will be decided by the mayor, and we all know where the mayor stands on this, and he's been very clear. To me, also just doesn't seem right. I mean, it just seems like, there should be a vetting process. It should involve all council members. Maybe each council member appoints someone or something like that. But for the mayor to do it, to me, is just unconscionable. And I think it doesn't promote the diversity, really vetting the process. And I think people later on could really point to this as being something that was underhanded, was trying to pull a fast one among for the people in the city. And I think for this, because this is for ourselves, we have to be incredibly careful. We want to make sure that this has their time to be vetted, their time for people to look at it, argue the pros and cons. So yeah, so I some issues with this, I just absolutely cannot support it. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Mayor, at the appropriate time, I also have a comment to share.
Great. Vice Mayor Lowing, and then we'll turn it over to the city manager. Okay, if you want to go now.
All right, thank you, Mayor, council members. There are a few data points I just wanted to ensure that all council members are aware of, since part of this is ongoing discussion among your committees. Actually, to start out, I would note that the effort ahead contemplated by this motion is not on our work plan. And as such, we would need to take a look at what effect that would have on any other priorities. In particular, looking at the element of the research or whatever follow-up work will be necessary in order to set a recommendation for any salary increase. So again, that would be follow-up work we'd need to complete. Also note that the Policy and Services Committee is currently following up on the referral from the council to look at what's really being, I think, viewed at this point as a expense reimbursement that would be on the order of $2,000 per year with a basic criteria under which that expense reimbursement would be issued. And also, finally, note for your awareness that there are potentially 2 other ballot measures that the city may be sponsoring this November. One is for the Quarry Road Parkland undedication, and the other is related to a directly elected mayor. So again, just to ensure that you're aware of those pieces as moving forward for this.
Vice Mayor Lowing.
Yeah, a number of comments that have already been stated, particularly by Mr. Tanaka, have to do with the compensation or the raises or the percentage increases, which are frankly irrelevant when you're getting an extra $600 a month. And that's not what's on the docket tonight. The docket is how do we set up a committee to have this considered and have something come back to us, or the recommendation could come back to us of not do anything. So just wanted to focus on the structure here. But, there's also things about, this is supposed to be a passion project, Mr. Tanaka says, which is true. And I don't think anybody's sitting up here because they want to maximize their dollars per hour. I mean, that's not an option. And no one's going to recommend that it's an option. But, along with passion comes, as was outlined in the original colleagues memo, trying to get more people involved and try to be fair to the people who are up here. You voted against the council this whole thing, but you also just ran for a job that gets paid $175,000 a year on top of your passion. So I think there's a reasonability level in public servants that goes down to the local level at some level. So I'm just eager to get the committee working on it. As I stated in my comments, which I don't know that were embraced, there's no time constraint being put on the committee. If they say they need a year or 2 years or whatever, that's what they need to do the research. And I said that we would have an option, but that option is narrowed because it's taken so long to get here. And it may be down to almost 0 right now. So I totally respect what the city manager is saying in regard to the issues there. And I talked about this originally last July with the city manager, that we didn't get moving pretty soon, it would be really tough. So we just want to focus on the creation of the committee for the evening. And if someone doesn't like the possibility of our esteemed mayor making the choices, then that's totally fine. That's what we're here to discuss.
Thank you for the addition of esteemed. Councilmember Burt.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple things. One is thinking about the city manager's comments on this adds to our work plan and staff's work plan. And it's a real question of whether this is really any kind of an urgency or top priority, given that we've just had the most significant increase in compensation. I agree that percentage basis on a low amount is maybe not the best measure, but then we've also got this expense compensation stipend coming forward. So 2 increases right after we've basically had a new council elected, and most of the members that new members suddenly want to change our compensation practices significantly, several steps. And I think that's something to reflect on. We bought into the current understanding as still everybody's eligible to change their what we should do going forward. But I think that's it makes me uncomfortable on proceeding on so many different aspects of this as if that's a real priority of this council. And second, the thought about upcoming ballot measures, I'm not sure this will have great support from the public, and I wouldn't want it to undermine more important ballot measures going forward. And I think even if we have these guardrails to try to make it not appear self-serving, I'm concerned that voters will perceive it that way. I think about when Valley Water had their term limits change and how much that affected voters' attitudes toward that agency in general when they tried to extend their own term limits. So I really encourage my colleagues to kind of think about these other considerations, as well as this just isn't, again, I don't think it's a proper appointment process.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to the prior comments, I think what I would say in response is I am not in this for myself at all. I can afford to do this. That's, I knew what the compensation was, and I ran knowing that. And I'm one of those privileged people who can afford it. I am interested in the subject matter because of who cannot run, has not run, has great ideas, great capacity to lead, great capacity to shape the future of our city, but just can't make it work financially. To the great suggestion from Councilmember Burt, I think that maybe folks should not be appointed by the mayor, the esteemed mayor. I am certainly, very open as the seconder to a different process. I think Councilmember Burt suggested that each of us could, if we've moved it to 7 members, which it looks like we are currently contemplating, each of us put forth a name. Another option is that the city council collectively would select them. I think we could come up with a process that gives a little bit more scope.
Totally open to that as the maker.
So I will. Yes, I'd like to suggest a friendly amendment to the motion that says instead of appointed by the mayor, it would be 7 members. With each council member appointing 1 member. No? What?
I think that's fine. Relative to the 7, if we're going to have it as it were, then we'd have to pull it out of the hat or something. I picked out a council member, or somebody else picked out, someone else that wasn't. Lottery.
I think we need to say no more than 4 of which. I think that's what was intended, right? No more than 4 to be former city council members, correct? Wasn't it a concern that they shouldn't be all former city council members, right?
That was my concern, but I know there was also concern that we had plenty of them. So I was okay with absolutely 4, but I'm okay with no more than 4. So I would leave it to the maker and the seconder.
Yeah, I had adopted Councilmember Vinker's 4 and 3 if you want to change that, you can, but
Got it. I understand now.
Great, thank you. And I like Vice Mayor Lowing's suggestion of just doing a lottery to figure out who's appointing former council members and who's appointing members at large. And Councilmember Koo, was that your knee? or-
No, this time it's really my
Okay,
finger.
great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Um, Sorry, it was not appropriate. I'm so sorry. I saw somewhere here, it says SB 529. It should be SB 329 in the motion. I think fourth line down. There you go. I also wanted to say, I heard 329. So this whole compensation thing comes about because, as Councilmember Lithcott Haynes said, is to give opportunities to those who will need the salary in order to serve. So I was kind of wondering, for those council members that make over a certain amount of income, perhaps they don't qualify then. If it indeed it is to encourage people to have interest and to apply for this position, then we should also look at a component where candidates or appointed council members or elected council members actually make a certain level, and then after that since they already have a good income, then they don't need to take the salary. I mean, I don't know if that's something that council members will consider if they want to move this forward. I will say that Policy and Services, Councilmember Lithcott Haynes asked why I did this, why I'm in the council position. And, like Councilmember Burt said, it was something to serve our community as a public service. And I don't think it ever entered into my head that I would be making a salary from it. But what Councilmember Lithcott Haynes says is also reasonable, that, we want to have a wider variety of people serving. And if that's the case, then perhaps, we limit what the income level is for those that is going to get a salary. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think, yeah, I'm comfortable with where we're at. I mean, I think part of the intent of what Vice Mayor Lowing was doing was trying to simplify the recommendation coming out. And I feel like some of these recommendations is kind of going back in the way of overly complicating this. And again, I mean, I think the city manager made a really good point about timeliness, and this has nothing to do with that. I think this is just creating a better system to move forward, to be able to seek that community feedback in a very open timeline. So I'm comfortable with this. I see no other lights, so I'm hoping we can then move to a vote, but no, of course. Councilmember Vinker, go ahead.
Thank you. I put my light on with trepidation because I'm sitting very near you and I know you're ready for this to move along. But I think that the points about not rushing this are well taken. I think it's unlikely, even if we did rush, we could get on the ballot this year. And therefore, I don't feel a rush. And I actually would like to propose that we do a similar thing that we do with boards and commissions and just take applications. We may not get a lot for something like this. It's not particularly sexy or interesting. But I think that other than each of us trying to point one and we're pointing the same one and then there's only 6 appointed, and that sounds to me very messy. And I'm wondering if I guess I would propose a friendly amendment that we go through an application and interview and selection process by council at large.
No, because that the complexity and the months to get it. And we've already said 4 are council members. So we're doing all these applications for 3 citizens. And as I've said in my comments, this committee will probably take public comment from a lot of people. So they're going to listen to a lot of different points of view. So I don't want to accept that. Thank you.
Any other, don't want to cut off anybody who wants to? All right, then seeing no other lights, if the clerk can call the vote.
Councilmember Burt,
No.
Councilmember Ku,
No.
Vice Mayor Lowing,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Hames,
Yes.
Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
No.
Councilmember Vinker.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-3.
Excuse me, Mayor, I think we need one clarification on the method of identifying the 4 council members. I think you made reference to a lottery that would identify which council members are appointing former council members.
Correct.
Okay.
So we can draw that at our next meeting. Okay, chat with you how we do that. Okay, great. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.